Throughout history there have been many different criminals who were sentenced to death for their evil crimes. Some of the most serious offences someone would have been executed for over the centuries was high treason, murder and arson. Still today in some countries, the death penalty is used, and one woman who faced the ultimate sentence in 1955 was a woman referred to as Bloody Babs. Barbara Bonnywood Graham was inside of San Quentin, executed for being involved in the murder of an elderly widow. She was not the only person involved in the killing, but she became the third woman in California to be executed by gas, which was not a common method of capital punishment. Join us today as we look at the execution of Barbara Graham and her crimes, and as always, to support our channel, please make sure to subscribe. Barbara Graham was born Barbara Elaine Ford on the 26th of June 1923. Her mother earned a living through illicit means, but at the age of 23 she married Joseph Wood, and Barbara's surname was changed. When Barbara was 2, her mother, who was still a teenager, was arrested and was sent to a reform school, and Barbara was placed in foster care. She would later claim she was badly treated in this, and that she was also beaten. But when her mother was released at the age of 21, she refused to allow her daughter to live with her, and Barbara was then raised by strangers and members of her extended family, being passed from pillar to post. She was a clever and intelligent young woman, but was not the most educated, and as a teenager she was arrested for vagrancy, and she served time at a reformatory school for girls, in the same place her mother had been held. In 1939 she was released from this, and she tried to then make a new life for herself. She would marry Harry Kielhammer, a US Coast Guard guardsman, the following year, and she began to study in business college. The couple had 2 children, but their marriage was not a happy one, and within 3 years the pair had divorced. Harry Kielhammer was then given custody of their 2 children, and over the following years Barbara married twice more, but it was clear that a traditional and settled life was not for her, and as hard as she tried, things would just not work out for her. She began to work as a prostitute like her mother, and she did this during the Second World War, visiting many men who were based on naval bases. These women were known as seagulls, and she travelled to different areas such as Long Beach and San Diego, but Barbara Graham was later arrested for her work. She had worked for some time in this manner, and she was just 22, and was noted for having striking red hair and good looks, and she also worked inside of a brothel for a madame named Sally Stanford. She also became involved in gambling and selling narcotics, and she became close with a number of career criminals. But she was then imprisoned for perjury, as she gave a false alibi for 2 criminal friends, and she was held for a while, but following this she moved to Reno, Nevada. She worked inside of a hospital and as a waitress, and it seemed like she managed to turn her life around. But then she boarded a bus for Los Angeles and returned to her old illegal ways of working. In 1953, she married Henry Graham, who was a bartender inside of one of the bars she used to go to, and the couple had a child named Tommy. However, Henry Graham was a drug addict, and he was also a low-level criminal. Barbara met his friends, Jack Santo and Emmett Perkins, and she then had an affair with Perkins. He told her about a target, 64-year-old widow, Mabel Monahan, who it's believed had a lot of cash and jewellery stored inside of her home in Burbank. Mabel was a retired performer, and her ex-son-in-law was a multimillionaire, who was linked to the ownership of a number of gambling clubs. There was a belief that she had $100,000 in a safe within her house, which today would be worth over $1 million. But on the 8th of March 1953, Barbara had dinner with Perkins, Santo, and a safecracker named Shorter. He would claim he did not want Graham to be involved, but the following evening the theft would occur. On the evening of the 9th of March, Barbara Graham gained entry into Mabel Monahan's house, and she asked to use the phone, claiming she had car problems. The safecracker then entered, along with Santo, Perkins, and another man, and Monahan was then beaten. Her mouth was gagged and she was bleeding. The gang ripped apart her home looking for her safe, and Barbara handed a gun to Perkins and demanded to knock the old lady out. But she was having problems breathing because of the gag, and it was then said Barbara began to violently beat the elderly lady. As the men left, they assumed she had been killed, but then 2 days later she was discovered dead by her gardener. The group made off with nothing of value, despite the fact there was great wealth inside the house. But then 5 men were arrested accused of the murder, and one of them was Shorter, the safecracker. He was worried about a future execution that may happen to him, and he turned state's evidence to tell about the murder and robbery. Shorter would later be kidnapped and murdered by Santo and Perkins. But Barbara Graham was linked to the crime, and she was known as Bloody Babs. She had no alibi, and she would later accept an offer from an inmate to provide a false one. But this inmate was working to reduce her sentence, and with this she was brought to trial. Barbara was convicted of the murder, and along with Santo and Perkins, she was sentenced to death. She did appeal her sentence and this did fail. However, on the 2nd of June 1955, she was transferred to San Quentin State Prison, the day before her execution was due. She was to die through the gas chamber, which today is not the most common execution method used in America. On the day of her execution, it was scheduled to take place at 10 a.m, but she was then given a short stay of execution for 45 minutes. The judge then said her execution would then take place at 11:30 a.m. Barbara Graham replied, "Why do they torture me? I was ready to go at 10 o'clock. At 11:28 a.m, she was led from her cell and she was taken into the execution chamber, where the gas chamber was. She requested a blindfold so she could not see the people who were looking on, and her final words were, "Good people are always so sure they're right." She was advised by the executioner that taking a deep breath of cyanide would make her ordeal quicker and easier, and she replied with, "How the hell would you know, you silly rascal?" The executioner would then write of her final moments. He said, "We had her strapped in. She was given 2 stays. We had to open the door and unstrap her and take her back to her cell. She didn't go until 11:30. She was supposed to go at 10. I patted her on the leg and told her to take a good whiff." The executioner then lowered the lever that caused the cyanide pellets to drop into a bowl of sulfuric acid, which was under Barbara Graham's chair. Within 30 seconds, Barbara slipped out of consciousness, and she then rocked forward 4 or 5 times before her head fell. She was quivering and shaking to her death. Bloody Babs, or Barbara Graham, was a woman who had a rather tough life, and she would fall into the same sort of work that her mother did. She did not have the best start in life, and stumbled towards a life of crime. She was a cold-blooded murderer, whose actions were supposed to result in her getting rich from theft, but she could not help herself but kill a woman who was elderly and vulnerable. Her execution was one which was slightly different, and she did receive a couple of stays of execution for some reason, but she would never be reprieved. Thanks for watching. To support our channel, please make sure to subscribe, and once again, thank you so much for watching.